Morning. Or good afternoon, because my stomach is telling me it's getting close. They said there was a microphone up here, but there's not, so we'll just go with this. First off, let me just say thank you, to and joining us in this celebration of my grandmother's life and a life well lived. And from my family to all of you, thank you for being a part of it with us this afternoon, and thank you for joining in the celebration of my grandmother, Janice Marie Fraumann's life. It means so much that we get to spend this afternoon with all of you. My name is Bobby. I am the first and the only grandson of Bob and Jan Fraumann. I inherited all the good looks. That's my proclamation to the family. I'm claiming that. I also got her gene of fashion and style, so I'm going to proclaim that one too. But I have a beautiful wife. The Lord has blessed me with a beautiful wife, the most beautiful wife in the whole world in my mind. She's given me two beautiful offspring, Cadence and Michaela. I have a 2.5-year-old son and a almost 1.5-year-old daughter. And in preparation for what I was going to say tonight, or this afternoon, what I was going to say the other night, I was asking my two kids who were at the table with me. They saw Dad writing down some stuff, and they just assumed that it was color time, and they were going to get to color with Dad. And I asked them, Michaela, what would you say to Jan if you could see her right now? And she was too busy sucking on a fruit squeezer, which is awesome. And her eyes were in the back of her head, so I was like, not the time. So I asked my son, Cadence, hey, what would you say to Jan right now if you could talk to her? And he looked and pondered for a minute, and it floored me and my wife and what he said. He said, happy birthday, Jan. And for a minute, I was like, what? But it seemed so fitting that today we celebrate her birthday. One of the last words I ever got to tell my grandmother was, this is not goodbye. This is see you later. This is not death. This is life. And I was thinking about, as I was writing down with my family at the table with me, and what could I say? What verses stick out to me? And immediately, the first verse that popped into my mind was Matthew 5:16, which says, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds, and that they would glorify your Father in heaven. My grandmother, Jan Fraumann, was the embodiment of that verse. As I can attest to all the beautiful faces that are in this room, her light shined bright and left a permanent mark and stain on every individual in here. I can look out, and I met so many people last night, and it was so overwhelming to hear story after story. And today, as I look out into this congregation and the gathering assembled here today, I don't just see a face and an individual. I see a story, and a story of a daughter and of a wife and of a mother and a mother-in-law and a grandmother and a great-grandmother and a friend, a beloved friend to all. Her light was her story. There was something about her that left its mark, its stain on our lives. We forever remember it. I've heard so many stories just in the last 24 hours that your grandmother was so gracious. She was so kind. Your grandmother was so loving. It hit me that in Galatians 5:22, you guys were all repeating just the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. And that every story that I heard had that in common with it, and that she was so sacrificial with her time. And I would just like to say real quick, because I got a problem. I like to talk a lot. And I was telling my grandfather that, the other night, I didn't know what I was going to say. So I just went out and I started walking and talking, and it was drizzling. And I was speaking to myself, and it was 12 o'clock at night, and the neighborhood dogs were barking at me. And I got real loud and animated, and what am I going to say? And I looked down at my timer, and we were at 47 minutes. And Bob has only given me 10. So I tried to barter some time from the family's other speeches, but they did not give me any. But I want to cut it short, and I want to keep it simple today and keep it about Jan and glorifying her life and her light. My story is that what I saw in my grandmother was that no matter what situation she was in her life, no matter what she went through, what she was going through, or what she was going to have to go through, she was always there for us. I remember as a kid, she would take us to Walmart. She would drop whatever it is that she was doing when she was when she was in our younger years, when we were little kids and she was busy working. She would say, all right, let's go to Walmart and let's buy a toy. And then she would bring us back to the house and not just throw us in the corner, but she would play with us with that toy or watch The Sound of Music over and over and over again. And I'm scarred. But that was my grandmother just truly, honestly spending time. It wasn't fake, it wasn't phony, it was genuine, and it was real. And then as I grew up, I saw it as it affected others. And whatever your story is, I encourage you and challenge you to tell it to someone else today, whether you were in a prayer group or a small group and she spent time to pray with you, or you were in the hospital behind closed doors in treatment with her, and she was gracious enough to say, hey, what's going on? Let me pray for you. Or if she's given her testimony on this stage and wanted to sit up here and pray with every person that needed prayer, uncomfortable after an amputation. She was sacrificing her time for everybody else. And what I want you guys to just think on, reflect on, that it was not just my grandmother's love, it was not just her kindness or her gentleness, that it was the Father's love inside of her. It was the Father's kindness. It was the overflow of the Father's love inside her that was gushing out of her and affected everyone in her marketplace, everyone in her general vicinity. It was the Father's kindness that was the overflow. Real quick, we talked about the fruits of the Spirit, and it's interesting that it was illustrated as a fruit because fruit usually grows on trees. And I thought about that for a long time. What does the tree have to do to grow any kind of fruit? Does it have any control over the weather? It needs sunlight, it needs rain, but it can't control the sun, and it cannot control the weather, but the tree needs those things in order to produce fruit in its life. And the tree can only control one thing, and that's how deep its roots go in good soil. And I would say that about my grandmother, that her roots went deep in the Word, in her prayer life, in her relationship with Jesus. And as the result, you see the light that shined in her life, the fruit. It reminds me of Peter when he walked on water. I think everybody knows that story, but Jesus sends his disciples into the boat, and he says to go ahead of them across this lake. And Peter is the head honcho. He's the fisherman. He's the captain of the boat, so he's been on it before, and he knows what to do. And halfway through their journey somewhere, they hit this storm. And if anybody's been on the boat, I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years. I've been across the Atlantic, and there's some pretty big waves and some pretty big storms, and they're hard to ignore. They're hard to just put aside. I'm sure that Peter gets into survival mode. When a storm comes in your life, the first thing that we start to do is go into survival, take care of the boat, take care of myself, a selfish mentality. We got to survive. But here comes this beautiful Savior named Jesus. He walks out on the water, and Peter sees him. And there was something in the eyes of Peter, or in Jesus, that kept the gaze of Peter fixated on him. It was intoxicating. It was the love of Jesus that Peter forgot the whole storm. He forgot the waves, and that he did something crazy. He stepped out of the boat. He abandoned himself. To me, that reminds me so much of my grandmother, that whether it was polio, she wasn't worried about herself. She stepped out of the boat and she started sacrificing for others. When she found out that she had cancer, she was not in the boat. She was out of the boat dealing with other people, praying for other people. When she found out she had to have her leg amputated, she was in the hospital loving on other people. When she found out that she had 2 weeks to live, my last memory will always be when we went down there, I said, Jan, we're not coming back. This is going to be the last time we see you. And I got to tell her, this is not goodbye, this is see you later. And I said, I want to pray for you. And she said, no, I'm going to pray for you. And she prayed for me 15 minutes. And then she prayed for my wife and my 2 children and my sister and her husband and her other grandchild, and her 3 great-grandchildren, and her other Greg and Terry and Victoria and Sophia. And it was about her praying for us, not about us praying for her in her last moments. So tonight, today, as you think about Jan Fraumann and her life and her legacy, think about her light that was shining, and don't let her light fade with today's passing. I challenge each and every one of you to keep your eyes fixated on Jesus. And just like Peter, and just like my grandmother, when the storms come into your life, you'll find yourself not in the boat, but walking above the storms, above the waves. The storm of cancer, my grandmother fought with it, but she walked above it. And her light touched each and every person in this room. Thank you so much again for coming and celebrating today with us. Truly, it is an honor to spend time with you. Thank you.